Everyone, Mr. Harvey here. Gonna create this video for the second half of this end of chapter 15 lecture. Remember, we were talking about labor, trade unions, and we are in the midst of a conversation about socialism. We just kind of talked about the First International and how the First International really made Marxism the most popular form of socialism. And that this was due to the scientific characteristics of Marxism. Now we're going to kind of look at socialism and its place in some of our major countries. We're going to look at socialism in Great Britain first, and kind of the role socialism played in those countries, in France, in Germany, and in Russia. So let's get into it. So socialism really didn't have a big impact in Great Britain, and that was because of Parliament. Parliament had and has, we've known this, has a pulse on the people, and Parliament knows that, you know, in order to prevent radicalism, in order to prevent revolution, in order to prevent, you know, gnarly things from happening in a country, you're going to need to take care of the workers. And we see Parliament act. We see Parliament kind of stave off revolution, stave off socialism, stave off radicalism and reform by simply giving the workers what they want. Now, one kind of important event that kind of happens in British politics is the rise of the Labour Party. In the early 1900s, Great Britain went a little conservative and started to attack unions. And because of this, you're going to see the Labour Party be created and start sending members to Parliament. And that sent a clear signal to politicians in Great Britain that, hey, might be a good idea to not attack unions so much. Maybe they're attacking, and they know that, well, you know, we're probably attacking unions too much, and they need to ease up. And in order to you know, and we're going to see Parliament, in order to kind of stop socialism, to stop any radicalism, they're going to have to make changes. But the rise of the Labour Party sent a clear message to conservatives and liberals in Parliament who were supporting the dismantling of unions that, hey, it might not be a good idea because workers clearly like their unions. Now, there was some British socialism. It's not really well known. It's not super important, but there was an influential group of socialists in Great Britain called the Fabian Society. They were absolutely 100% non-Marxist. They did not support a violent proletariat revolution. They favored gradualism. They favored a peaceful approach to social reform, but they really never, this Fabian Society really never kind of kicks off, and that's because Parliament will listen to its voters, will listen to the working class, and will facilitate change through legislation. Some of the leaders of this Fabian Society were the Webbs, H.G. Wells. But the key person here who's going to facilitate reform in Great Britain and really kind of give the socialists no fuel to court other voters is going to be David Lloyd George. He is going to be very important. We're going to please highlight him in your notes. He's going to be one of the important individuals who constructs and orchestrates the Treaty of Versailles. He really messes that up pretty badly, along with Clemenceau and Woodrow Wilson. But in terms of reform in Great Britain, he is going to really stave off the Socialists and the Labour Party by providing unemployment and health care for his citizens and for the working class. And he pursued this agenda because he was scared of the Socialists and because he was scared of the Labour Party. This is going to get him in action. So he's going to initiate this National Insurance Act of 1911 to provide health care and unemployment for the workers. And that's a direct, salvo at the Socialists and the Labour Party. Now, the Conservatives, the House of Lords, was pissed. They were not stoked on this. They were saying, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? And David Lloyd George, he had bigger problems on his hands. He The last thing he wanted was his workers to be discontented and upset and for him to have problems at home. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the early 1900s. What is going on in Europe? There is a united Germany. There are problems in the Balkans. There is problems in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. David Lloyd George does not need problems at home. He sees there are problems abroad. World War I is slowly starting to get ready to go. The last thing David Lloyd George and Great Britain needs is a revolt and revolution at home. So they are going to shut the House of Lords up by limiting their power. And through this Parliament Act of 1911, they are going to override, they're going to create a power that they have to override the veto of the House of Lords. They're gonna limit the power of the House of Lords. And David Lloyd George is doing this to say, hey, we have bigger problems on our hands. There's a war getting ready to start. So Great Britain is going to limit the power of the House of Lords. And these social programs showed that Great Britain was taking their working class seriously. They were taking a role in the life of their citizens, but they were also trying to prevent any discontent at home because there are problems abroad in Europe. And here are a picture of the Webbs and that a part of that Fabian Society, this socialist group. All right. French socialism, ladies and gentlemen, is a little bit different from Great Britain. French socialism was very disconjointed, not very united, very factionalized. You had some factions like led by Jean Jaurès that wanted to cooperate with the middle class, some by Degoudé, I believe, who did not want to cooperate with the middle class. So French socialism, the main idea here that I want you all to get is French socialism really didn't take off because it was really factionalized and a lot of these groups didn't get along. During the Second International, we talked about the First International, which was really important for allowing Marxism to become the most prominent form of socialism. The Second International, ladies and gentlemen, served to unify and try to unify socialist parties. Now, the French government is going to have this, event where they did not allow the participation of socialists in their government and in their cabinets. Socialism will be very much condemned in France, and we're going to see the socialists set up their own party and become quite prominent. But the problem is many of these socialists are not going to work together and get along, and so even though they become there's many people who have support for some socialist ideologies, the fact that they don't cooperate with one another really leads them to not get along and to not ever really gain some traction in France. The French labor movement really wasn't interested in politics or socialism. French workers often voted for socialists, but really didn't do much afterwards. They really never got super politically active and went out and went on strike or went out and canvassed for them. And so the socialist movement in France really was messed up. It really just ever didn't gain a lot of momentum. You also had some of the labor unions, which attracted some of the workers, rival socialist parties. For example, the main labor union, this confederation, will support a strike that goes against socialist beliefs. And so what you're seeing here is a lot of these social groups just really never cooperate and really never get on the same page. And because of that, socialism really doesn't have a huge, movement in France. It really isn't going to leave that big of a mark on French politics or history. Okay? Now, in Germany, it's a different story. Now, we know Germany is governed right now by our main dude, OVB. And the Liberal Socialist Party that he's going to go toe-to-toe with, and we know that OVB is a very formidable foe. the German Social Democratic Party, otherwise known as SPD, it's not switched around. It's I know it's the initials are SDP. They call themselves the SPD. This is the group that Bismarck is really going to go after in terms of socialists in the new Second Reich or German Empire. Now, the SPD is going to resent many non-socialist governments and be a very crucial player in keeping socialism alive. Ironically, the most conservative country in Europe is going to help keep Marxism alive. And even more ironic, because in World War One, the Germans, in order to kick Russia out of the war, are going to sneak a socialist into Russia to ignite revolution, and that's Vladimir Lenin. It's the Germans who do that. So very, very interesting dynamics going on with Germany and socialism. Now, Bismarck is going to go after them. We know that. Bismarck is conservative. He wants no socialism. He wants nothing that they want to get done. But we know that Bismarck is sly. We know that Bismarck has a great pulse on his country, has a great pulse on the workers, and we're going to actually see him enact some of their reforms in order to take credit for it. So he and the Kaiser and this conservative structured government can remain in power. He believed that socialism would undermine German politics and society. He, continually suppressed their activities, their meetings, but his initial efforts to repress them is going to fail, and a lot of the SPD are going to, gain more power in the Reichstag, in their legislative body. And so Bismarck, knowing him, we know he's going to take a different approach. And what does he do? He's just going to do what they want, but take credit for it. So he's going to pass healthcare. He's going to pass insurance. He's going to pass disability, old age pensions. He's going to pass a lot of social reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, write this down. He is going to pass a ton of things that they wanted and take credit for it. So the German workers will support him and his conservative government. We know he's a real politique. He will do whatever it takes to maintain his power and get what he wants. And what he wants is to maintain power for the Kaiser. And so he's gonna kind of dabble in some liberalism, much like Disraeli. We talked about that in Great Britain. Bismarck is kind of doing the same thing in order to maintain power. Okay? And so he's representing a conservative alternate to socialism without really changing, property policy, without, attacking the middle class and the upper classes. He's, giving the workers what they want, and without changing their conservative structured government. Okay. Now this is huge, ladies and gentlemen, a huge event. Bismarck is going to be forced to resign by Kaiser Wilhelm II. I will talk more about Kaiser Wilhelm II with World War I. But one of the things that I want you to know about him personally was that he was born with a deformed left arm. He blamed his British nurses for this, and he was so bitter about this. He was so insecure about his left arm that it made him a very insecure, rash individual. He was always trying to impress other people, and he was very, very conscientious of Bismarck, and he knew that Bismarck was a legend. He knew that Bismarck had a lot of political pull, and he's going to clash with him and kick him out and force him to resign. And this Kaiser is going to lead Germany into World War II. World War I. You betcha that if Bismarck had been around, he would have never, ever, ever allowed the Kaiser to kind of go down this road to World War I. But Bismarck will die, and we are going to see, once Bismarck is out of the government and dead, Kaiser Wilhelm II is going to be very reckless with German foreign policy and eventually lead Germany into World War I. And they disagreed over foreign policy, but it was also due to the Kaiser's insecurity over Bismarck. He was very, very, very jealous of Bismarck's status, very jealous of his power, very jealous of, his fame and all of his accomplishments, and he was very insecure about that, and he's going to fire Bismarck, and try to kind of go at it alone and really mess up. Now, this emperor, in terms of socialism, Kaiser Wilhelm II is going to allow anti-socialist legislation to expire, and so we're going to see different socialist groups start to kind of have a little bit of a voice in the German Empire. One such group were some of the Marxists. They were called the Erfurt Program, and they insisted on controlling the means of production in the country, but they didn't want to focus on revolution, and they wanted to focus on the lives of the workers, and they didn't want to start a revolution because, well, they thought revolution was inevitable. So their focus was on the workers and not creating a revolution. Remember, they're Marxists. They believe in revolution, but they didn't necessarily want to work for it. They thought that was inevitable. It was going to happen. So they were going to focus on the workers. Okay. Now, another group that's going to challenge these Marxists is going to be the revisionists. They were another group of socialists, a little bit more conservative with Germany. And they believed that you could achieve equality without having revolution. And they were led by this guy named Bernstein. And he felt that, look, if you expand voting rights to the working class, that workers could improve through legislation and not revolution. Well, the Erfurt Program, the Marxists said, hey, man, you really think that's going to work in a militaristic, authoritative Germany? No. So they were saying, you think that's really going to work here where we have, a strong conservative government as opposed to a liberal government? You think you're going to solve things through legislation? So there were a lot of critics to Bernstein's ideas with socialism. But the key idea that I want you all to get here is that you see socialists split. And so that's another reason of why the socialists aren't really going to gain a lot of traction as well, because they're too busy fighting themselves. All right, I'm going to stop here. Let's end this chapter talking about Russia. That will be the last video. So my 3 videos to end chapter 15 are going to be in 3 parts. We're going to talk in the last video about Russia and the Bolsheviks.